Thank you all so much for coming out tonight and for taking the time to have a discussion with us. As you've seen, the evening starts off with the title, When a Data Center Comes to Town, What We Do Now Decides Our Future. I'd like to start off the evening by introducing who we are, Great Lakes Neighbors United, who've organized all of this. We are a citizen-led, citizen-organized, mission-driven grassroots organization that started when a bunch of us concerned citizens. I myself live here in the city of Port Washington as well as others, but also others around in the surrounding areas. We actually got together because we were frustrated with our voices not being heard, and we wanted a deeper conversation about what's been going on concerning the Vantage data center development in our town. So you can go to our website, www.saveportwashington.com, to see all of our action items and mission and find out more about how you can get engaged. There are many, many opportunities to engage and get involved, so please check that out, and we will be giving you a few more ideas and more specific information about how to get involved at the end of this evening's presentations. And of course, I'll direct you also to our Give Butter donation page that's also on our website. So if you feel the calling to donate, please feel free to visit that website as well. We have the QR code up here. And again, really tonight is all about empowering all of us and you and finding out more about key concerns and questions that we have about what's been going on, about the data center, various aspects. Of course, tonight we aren't going to be able to cover everything. This is just a beginning, and we do hope to have more informational events in the future. So please, you have on your seats comment cards, and those cards will be collected by us later. So if there's anything that you want to comment on or have questions about or would like us to address in the future, please feel free to fill that out. We will have a Q&A after the presentations, but we might not get to everyone, or some people may not want to actually raise their hand and ask, so please feel free. That's what those cards are there for. They're for you, and we will be reading them and collecting them. I just wanted to show you a few slides, a few pictures of us in action. So we are also a very active group. You might have seen us out at 902 North Wisconsin Street. We will be out there again this weekend, Saturday and Sunday from 12 to 4. For our recall petition, we are helping to platform that. So if you want to stop by 902 North Wisconsin Street, it's on a corner, very visible house. Feel free to stop by and meet us there to sign or help us canvass or reach out just to talk. So we look forward to seeing you. Great, and with that, we'll move on to Charlie, yes.
How's everybody doing out there tonight? You guys doing good? Good. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Everybody from people who are on either side of this. We got some union members back there, and shout out to you guys. And I know that I heard some people saying I'm against your work, and I just want you to know I'm not against your work at all. You guys do a great job, whatever job site you're on, I'm sure you do a great job. It just has more to do with the AI data center specifically, but nothing to do with your work. And I know there's some people from Vantage here tonight. Sorry, I apologize. I know you're not happy with me, but oh well. So it goes. All right, and really look, at the end of the day, I'm just all about the community deciding for the community. That's it. That's it. Like if a community wants something, that's great. If they don't, that's fine. And we've got a bunch of other speakers to dive deeper into that. So I wrote notes. Usually I just do this off the top of the dome, but figure I got to keep it on track tonight. So I'm going to read a little bit. Shout out to Great Lakes Neighbors United. Thank you for hosting this event tonight. Thanks for inviting me. That was slicker than snot on a northern pike. That was really cool. And there we go. There we got the data center. All right, so look, to the community here, you guys are the ones dealing with the impacts of this. Positive for the construction jobs, negative for, you know, all, you got 24 hours a day construction, you're seeing light pollution, sound pollution, you're feeling the vibrations, all that. And really what it is, it's you, the community, that's going to guide Wisconsin through how to navigate this, because you're one of the first ones to do it. So thank you all, whoever you are, for being here tonight. Give yourselves a big round of applause. So tonight we're here to discuss AI. Oh, before I do that, guys, give our bartenders a big round of applause. Shout out. It's one of the best old fashions I've had since Wentz's Supper Club. Shout out to Wentz, but shout out to you guys. Make sure you tip your bartenders. Tonight we are here to discuss AI data centers, or as my grandma Sue calls them, A1 data centers. She's not sure why we're losing so much of our farmland and natural resources to store data for barbecue sauce, but I'll tell you what, she's not happy about it. She's not, now if it was mustard, she'd be willing to, you know, she'd let that slide, but see, I got jokes. I'm a comedian, and to be honest with you, I don't want to be up here tonight talking about AI data centers. I don't. And I've been told by some of you to stick to comedy. And I would be happy to stick with comedy as soon as our politicians stick with policy. And stop protecting big tech and start protecting the people that put them in office. It's like the State of the Union. I'm seeing who's clapping and who's not. I need one pissed off person behind me, one happy person clapping. I hate politics. And here I am. But I don't think this is political. I don't think it's political. I think it's a community issue, and I'm just glad that whoever you are, whatever side of it, we're in the same room talking. Thank God. It's nice to be in the same room talking. It's how we build bridges and not social media bubbles. These social media companies thrive off of us being divided. That's what gets it going. That's what gets you doing this. They divide us. That's what keeps us here. Okay, but when we're here, we can build bridges, whether you're on any side of this issue. You can talk to each other, understand each other a little bit more, and over time, that'll do good things. So that's the whole point here. All right, get off your soapbox. Jeez, Charlie. Look, we've got a bunch of speakers here tonight, so I'm going to be brief, even though I've already gone off script. But when it comes to AI data centers, I would love, and this is just me, it's not the whole group, but I'd like to see 4 things, okay? And this all revolves around the community design. But I'd love to see here, I look at Meta slide. It's control, honesty, information, and accountability. All right? And yes, that acronym does spell CHIA. There's nothing I can do about it, all right? Ironically, though, that's also the technology that regrew Elon's hair. So, all right, that joke kind of worked. We'll roll with it. All right, let's start with control. AI data centers, just so you guys know, AI data centers, they're not traditional data centers. They use different hardware like GPUs, and that leads to more energy and water consumption, which is why we're even talking about it. Even if there's a closed loop technology, all the new power plants that are being built to power those data centers consume water. So comparing an AI data center, I've said this before, but comparing an AI data center to a traditional data center, that's like comparing a dog to a wolf. You know, like they both kind of look like dogs, but I only let one lick my face. So it's that little white golden retriever over there. Expensive breed, I guess. I don't know. Anyways. All right, so hyperscale AI data centers, yeah, we're still on control. Hyperscale AI data centers are so big that personally, I think that the community should have control over if they want in their community, and I think it should just go to a referendum. You guys vote if you want it or no. Yeah. It shouldn't be that. that difficult. If you want it, great. If you don't want it, great. You know, but you should vote. Majority rules. That's democracy. Control also means how do we control AI as a technology? Right now, it's not looking good. It's not. Many of you have probably seen this. That's the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton. He says there's a 10 to 20% chance AI will end humanity. This is the guy who developed the technology that we're all using today. And it's not just him. I mean, Elon Musk says there's only a 20% chance of annihilation with AI. Who says only 20% chance? That's like saying I only took 20 of your beers last night. I don't understand it, but last week, OpenAI, which is the company that's going to be hanging out in the Vantage deal, their researcher, OpenAI researcher, resigns, accuses firm of suppressing AI risk studies. And here's a quote from Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei. If you don't know Anthropic, it's one of the big, it's like Meta, it's OpenAI, there's Anthropic, they're all competitors. But here's what he says. Just read it. He says, I think there is a serious risk of a major artificial intelligence attack. And the consequences would be so severe with casualties, potentially in the millions or more, that I believe we have no choice but to take serious measures to prevent it. He also said, I believe the only solution is legislation, laws that directly affect the behavior of AI companies. It sounds good, but just today, Anthropic safety researcher quits, warning world is in peril. And he quit because he wasn't getting the time of day. Look, this isn't some wild conspiracy theory cherry-picked from the headlines. These are predictions from the CEOs of the major AI labs. In 2023, I'm going off script again, but Sam Altman, the OpenAI dude, Google, all these guys signed a letter to Congress saying, this could kill us all. We need to regulate it. How many regulations? We have more regulations on a bratwurst than the entire artificial intelligence community. Doesn't make any sense. So I think it would be smart for our lawmakers to listen to the people on the front lines of this, on the forefront of the technology. So maybe, just maybe, before we give our land and give our water and our tax money and our quality of life in the communities to make AI stronger, we should make some laws to make sure it doesn't kill us. I mean, it seems obvious, right? It seems obvious, but you got to think from these tech companies' perspective. Going off script again, you got to think from these tech companies' perspective. They're racing to superintelligence because the first one to superintelligence gets to become a trillionaire because the AI robots replace all the jobs. All the jobs. You look at Elon Musk, he says there's going to be more robots than people in a few years. And most of those robots, because they're Elon Musk's, probably can't go within 500 feet of a school zone, but you got to think about it. You got to think about it. All of our jobs, according to these guys, is going, so they're racing to superintelligence, this golden goose, okay? I mean, are they being safe about it? The answer is clearly no. You know, I mean, it's kind of like you guys go ice fishing, right? You got your buddy that goes out on the ice in a truck, right? Is that safe? Well, let's just say if I'm in that truck, I'm rolling the windows down, okay? And I'm not putting my seatbelt on. Because out on the road, it's click it or ticket. But out on the ice, it's click it and casket. That's a no-go. But what I'm telling you is that these AI billionaires, they're racing out onto the ice in a semi, and they've got all of us ratchet strapped to the back. They're making it stronger, not safer. They are taking the risk. Let me rephrase that. They're getting the reward. We are taking the risk. That's not capitalism. That's not democracy. It's bullshit. Sorry, said bad word there. All right, anyways, let's get back to the script, Charlie. Jeez Louise. All right, so, did that. Oh, yeah, honesty. Okay, we want honesty here from the AI companies. No more NDAs. Amen. Yeah. No more chit-chatting with the Common Council and the mayor and getting a PR company ready to go, and then Then one day later, you present it to the people like there's a choice. There was never a choice. I mean, look at this. I mean, we got tech giant, this from a few months ago, tech giants considering $1.6 billion data center in Dunn County, Balloonist LLC. So this is up north a bit, but Balloonist LLC, that's the same shell company that brought the deal into Beaver Dam. And I don't know if it's actually a shell, I think allegedly shell company. It's not, they're hiding who it really is. It's Meta. I mean, I guess that's kind of a shell company. Like if you put that company up to your ear, you can hear Mark Zuckerberg raising your power bills. No, you like that one. You gotta come to all my shows, dude. That's the best laugh ever. God damn. I mean, if you're proud of what you're doing, bring it to the community. Don't get into a bunch of closed room sessions with the politicians. Don't get into a bunch of closed room sessions with the local lawmakers. We know you're just looking for the weakest link. And then you can steamroll over them. Don't do that. Bring it to, have an event like this where you can tell the community how great what you have is for the community. Do it before you bring it to the people. Otherwise, it's just going to tick people off, and then you get a bunch of people here tonight. And the next thing is information. Let us know exactly how much water you'll use, exactly how much energy you use. Will you restore the landscape if the AI bubble bursts?
Thank you.
Or will you run out of money? I mean, OpenAI, it says they're going to run out of money. Now, can Sam Altman, do a little shaking of the whatever and get more money? Probably. But what if he can't? Will you pay for all the costs added to our electricity? I mean, all the costs added to the electricity. Electricians, what the hell happened there, huh? Smart move, you guys. Will you pay for the additional health costs associated with building all the new gas plants or keeping coal plants online longer? My grandpa had COPD. That's something that if you have all this stuff floating through the air, that impacts that quite a bit. And people don't think, you don't think about the human cost of what you're putting into the environment. And it's not a bunch of hippie crap, it's health stuff, and it really does have an impact. Ask anyone who lives next to one of these plants. And then put it in the contract. Okay, Vantage, I know they told Port Washington residents initially there'd be like an 8-hour workday, and then now there's a 24-hour workday. You just steamrolled past that. That's not what you sold the community on. So, and that brings us to accountability. Anything you promise, put it in a contract, put it in print. If you actually mean it, put it in print. 70% renewables, is that in print? And is it in print in a legally binding way where you have to pay if it doesn't happen? And if you violate the contract, where is the money? Put the money up front, that's it. We are putting all the risk in as these communities. We just ask that you match it. And also, if your AI model, like we saw before, if your AI model kills millions of people with a biological weapon, you legally should be liable to pay for that. And I know some of you are out there thinking, well, that'll put us behind China or whatever. Well, I'll let Amadei take that argument. He said, I screwed up. I should put a space there. I am generally a skeptic about most kinds of international cooperation on AI, but this may be one narrow area where there is some chance of achieving global restraint. Even dictatorships do not want massive bioterrorist attacks. So let's get rid of the notion that we can't work with other countries to solve this. We're all humans and we're inventing a more powerful species. How do you think that's going to go? Look at all the technologically advanced species around the world. What have they done to the less technologically advanced? It's not good. It's not good. So, to be clear, these are just my suggestions, okay? And frankly, I've got a lot of more suggestions, but I'm out of time. I'm already over time, and I really wanted to make that Chia Pet joke. So, but we do have to be thinking about these things. We got to think about job loss. And I know it's good for some jobs, but that's only in the short term. Elon's robots. Think about that, okay? Think about all the jobs we're gonna lose in the short term. Think about mass surveillance. You got these flock cameras all the way up on 8, way up north. You got these flock cameras. What the hell are they doing? Where is all that data going? Are we aware of all of our data that's going in these data centers? You ever ask, why are they so big? How much of our data is in there? How much of our stolen information is in there? Or we sign the terms and conditions that nobody reads. We have to think about these things. We have to think about when we consolidate all the wealth in this country to 7 different hands. How do you think all of you, we're going to be on the, we are going to work, we are going to be owned by these companies. And sure, maybe universal basic income, they'll give us a little bit to go away. And then they'll throw little nuggets out there to divide us. They want to keep us divided, fighting over culture wars so we don't see what they're doing. This isn't funny. I should be funnier. I'll leave you with one last quote from Dario Amodei. He says, "This is a trap. AI is so powerful, such a glistening, is it glistening? Glittering. Frick. Glittering prize that it is very difficult for human civilization to impose any restraints on it at all. Very difficult, yes, but impossible, no. Wisconsin, we can lead the way. We can. Everybody in this room, we can lead the way." We are here tonight to make our voices heard to our elected leaders, so a data center does not tear another community apart. And I'm not saying we can't build the future, but we have to be smart about it. Because what good is the future? What good is the future without our freedom? We should ask that. Thank you guys so much.
If I could hijack for a minute, because I want to speak in support of Charlie. Most people know him as a comedian, and he's being dismissed as just somebody who's spouting off here. But you need to know that he actually has a degree in journalism. So he knows how to research, and he's actually a very smart person, and he could be doing anything.
I will take all the backhanded compliments here. I'm used to that. I appreciate you. I appreciate you.
And I mean what I say, Charlie, and anybody who knows me knows that. And I'm sticking up for you for all the right reasons, because you are here for all the right reasons. Y'all need to know he could be doing anything else with his time. But he has been in communities. He's been here. He's been in DeForest. He's talking with us in Beaver Dam. Seriously, he is taking his time out of his personal life to do this for all the right reasons. So yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes. Charlie!
You guys you're embarrassing me. Thank you. Thank you. You're too kind. Thank you for putting that massive target on my back for the most wealthy individuals in the world. I appreciate you. Thank you guys, you're too kind. Thank you.
All right. Does this work? There we go. All right, now you know what to hand it over.
I was gonna say, I don't know who put the agenda together. Put me after Charlie. I guess that was us. So good evening. I'm Matt Rismeyer, and I'm an outside agitator. I don't feel like one. That's sarcasm for anybody who doesn't know me. But this map that you're seeing here, this shows, I got just this thing here. This map shows the proposed high voltage power lines. You can see both where we're sitting right now and where my neighborhood is. My neighborhood is the proposed orange line, the new corridor, and if it is selected, I stand to lose a third of my home's value. So homes are the largest purchase that generally people make in their life, and home affordability is at an all-time low. I felt very privileged to be able to afford a home. But since the proposed data center came and the high voltage power lines started coming my way, I've lost a lot of sleep, and I've spent a lot of time on stuff like this. I didn't seek to get involved. I didn't seek to talk about data centers. I guess there's a similar sentiment here. You know, quite the opposite. I feel like it came to me, quite literally my backyard. So why am I telling you this? All right, okay, you're still here. These are all of the proposed routes. So I wanted to say, because the outside agitator thing really hit me, it kept me quiet for a while. You know, I'm not a resident of Port Washington. I'm a resident of Saukville, right next to where those lines may go. But none of you are outside agitators. You probably have similar stories to me. That's why we kicked it off with on the board here, you know, talk to your neighbor, tell them your story. Whatever motivated you to come tonight, environmental concerns, water, electrical prices, property value, you are not outside agitators. That language is designed to do one thing, which is shut down conversation.
Amen.
So we're not going to do that to you tonight. Instead, we have a live Q&A session, and we encourage discussion immediately following our panel presentations, and we've got a great group of experts here for you tonight. And lastly, we'll close with what you can do about it. We're going to give you a list of action items that you can use to demand better from your elected officials.
Great, and then with that, we'll take it away with our first speaker, Prescott Balch. Prescott is a retired technology executive with 38 years doing large-scale software development, mostly in the financial sector. He is as adamant that we need data centers as that we need them in the right place. His community of Caledonia successfully pushed back against a data center proposal, and since then, he has been helping communities across the country understand both the risks and the rewards associated with their data center proposals. So welcome, Prescott. Thank you.
So thanks to Charlie's reach, everybody probably knows I already don't think very highly of the Port Washington deal terms, but I'm not here to talk about that. I think the more productive thing for me to talk about tonight is how we got here, or how everybody got here. Because if you want to understand behaviors, look for the incentives. And I've been trying to figure out why communities are acting the way they are, why communities are so excited to do these deals in the first place, and really push aside any view of the risks. And I think I have an answer. And so I'm going to walk you through that. I get to skip the intro page because Christine already gave it. The story starts in 2013. Trust me, this won't take that long. So the world would be a better place if you had all listened to your math teacher and paid attention in class. You look at that formula and you say, whatever. I look at that formula and say, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. The red box circles the English language translation in case you really don't want to revisit algebra. But it boils down to the only way a community can raise the amount of taxes that it's charging to its residents is with new construction, which is great if you're in the construction business. It's not so great if you're in municipal government, because now you got to go find a lot of construction in order to justify even keeping pace with inflation. The legislature back in 2013 was very well-intentioned, maybe poorly executed, but well-intentioned. They wanted guardrails on tax levies. They were looking out for you. They didn't want unrestrained growth of tax levies by municipalities. And so they said, well, a good proxy for do you need more money is, are you building anything? Are you building new houses, new people, new office buildings, whatever? That's a reasonable proxy to determine whether you need more taxes. There are three problems, though. The first one is they didn't account for inflation. So now you need enough construction to overcome inflation. The second problem is human beings have free will. So if you give them a single variable problem to solve, they're going to change their behavior to solve that one variable. If you tell them construction is the only way that you can raise your tax levy, they're going to actively go seek out construction, whether they want it or not. And the even bigger problem is tax increment financing, which we'll come back to. And I know that makes people's eyes roll, but it's really important. So your mayor has a famous for me anyway, saying that there were dark clouds on the horizon over Port Washington, and we need to do this deal because of this future storm coming in. And the storm he's referring to is it's hard to keep pace with inflation. Port Washington, if you want to look at these numbers, it was averaging about 1.5% of new growth. So if you only have 1.5% new growth, you can only raise the tax levy 1.5%. Inflation during this time was much higher than that. Inflation over this time period was 30%. You only grew 16%. So your total taxes probably weren't going crazy unless you did a special referendum. But assuming just general growth of 16% versus 30% inflation, you're probably doing okay. But if you're running the city, you got a different problem. Everybody needs raises, all your inflation-sensitive expenses are going up, and you can't keep pace. So we have to get more construction. So what type of project might generate an awful lot of construction? I don't know. Then, fast forwarding to 2023, your state legislators wanted data center construction in the state, so they passed Act 19, which provided a sales and use tax exemption for all of the stuff that goes in the data center. This is worth a lot of money to data center developers, data center operators, and there was no sunset date on the legislation. So all of a sudden, shortly after that, no coincidence, lots of proposals showed up, including the one here. So now you have an eager city, an eager developer, but you still have a problem. And that problem is the project's too big. Your tax levy is $10 million a year, and you have $170 million worth of supporting infrastructure that you need to buy in order to support it. So the city can't borrow that much. No bank would do that. Just like you can't buy a $10 million house on a $50,000 salary, banks are only going to loan you money if you have the opportunity to pay it back. And even if you could, the developer could walk away. So then enter tax increment financing, which is a tool that the government has defined to give local governments the ability to attract and encourage development. So the deal here is Vantage borrows $170 million using their own means, and Port Washington pays them back via tax rebates with 7% interest. And between the principal, the interest, and the electric substation over 20 years, that turns out to be $455 million in tax credits. And it's the only way Port Washington can do the deal, but there's still a problem. And that problem is you're still too big. The state also has a law that says all of the development that you're doing in all of your tax increment districts combined can't be more than 12% of your total valuation, all the homes, all the businesses put together. So if they can't be that big, we have a problem. So what did the city do? They went to their legislators and said, we need help. They joined forces with the folks in Beaver Dam, and they got themselves an exception. So that's like the state government saying, go ahead and run with scissors. Apparently nobody asked why the rule existed in the first place, and it passed with a margin there that you've never seen before out of our legislature, and you'll probably never see again because they never agree this much on anything except maybe that the Packers are the favorite team of the state. I guess they'd probably do better there. So now you have an eager city, an eager developer, and the problems have been removed. But nobody connected the dots along the way. You have people solving one problem at a time and never looking backwards and saying, are we still achieving what we set out to achieve? What we were doing this for in the first place was that new construction so that we could keep pace with inflation and raise the tax levy so that we could continue to provide the services that the people expect. So can we do that? Can we raise the levy? Unfortunately, based on the way state law works, you can't unless you're going to raise taxes on the current residents of the city. The way that the TID works, those TID dollars are stuck in the TID paying for that $455 million. They're not contributing to your general fund. So if you raise the levy, it's only the current residents that pay. What if we don't raise the levy? Well, if you don't raise the levy, then you get no levy benefit out of this big giant deal that you just did. Your taxes will crater in 20 years when that TID closes, but you will have gotten no tax levy benefit at all out of the project. And then you also have a problem of open TIDs when you're done will be impaired by the lower tax rate. They will end up taking longer to pay off. So close all your TIDs before you get to 2045. Now let's go back to the math. Whether you raise the levy or not, you have a second problem. That second problem is that TV number, which is total valuation, is in Port Washington is going to double. So if you're into algebra, you've already had the light bulb go off in your head and you realize that future growth is going to be a shit ton harder, sorry for the language, but you've doubled the valuation. Now, after the data center construction is done, if you want to continue to keep pace with inflation, you have to do twice as much construction in order to do it. You were already struggling to keep pace with inflation at 1.5%, and now you have to double that to, again, be the same percentage behind inflation. You probably have to triple it or quadruple it in order to grow as fast as you need to. So is there a Hail Mary? How about indirect economic development? Data centers are uniquely bad at this because they're low employment and because most of the replaceable equipment in them is manufactured elsewhere. Is there a long-term payback? Well, here's where technology doesn't be your friend. Technology changes rapidly. If you're lucky and you get 35 years out of these facilities before they need to be reused for something else, that'd be good. But that's 10 to 15 years after the TID closes. Will it have been worth it? I don't know. You decide. If the hope is that other businesses will be attracted, I have a few maps. Here's one, Prineville, Oregon. Look for the white rectangles if you want to know what the data centers are. 15 years later, there's nothing in the immediate vicinity. West Des Moines, Iowa, which has a ton of other construction in town, has none near the data center facility of Microsoft. Boardman, Oregon, 31 data centers since 2011, not much else. Data centers are uniquely bad at attracting other businesses, largely because they don't have any people in them. And if the hope is legislative change to allow tax levy benefit without harm to current residents, I'll remind you it's an election year. So I also have no criticism of Vantage and no criticism of union laborers. I love people who build stuff. This is a legislative problem and a politician problem. The state legislator created a problem and the city reacted to it by chasing development at a very steep cost. Tech companies were happy to strike a one-sided deal as they should because they have to serve their owners. Nobody stopped to think what would happen to the taxpayer. Everybody talked themselves into approving a bad deal because they were chasing construction. Everybody was playing one chess move ahead. So I'll close just with this question. I think that explains what happened. You guys get to decide whether you think you should have expected better. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prescott. Our next speaker is Dan Eastman. Dan Eastman is a local Mequon attorney and a former member of the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. He has decades of experience in energy and regulatory law and is representing the citizens group recalling the mayor of Port Washington. Yes. Thank you, Dan. Exactly. Dan has some interesting thoughts on the utilities aspects of the data center project, which he will share with you now, in addition to a couple of legal updates as well. Yep.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you very much. The last time I was in this room was a couple of years back. I live in Mequon, and I'm an Ozaukee County resident. And I said, well, what do you care about Port Washington? You live in Mequon. I said, well, my family came to Port Washington in the 1840s, and we're still here. It's a place that means a lot to a lot of us in this very small county. We're the smallest footprint county in the state. Now, Pepin County will sometimes argue with us, but the reality is we're the smallest little county in the state, and our county has an amazing lakefront, and it has the Milwaukee River, and it has the freeway that runs, and they all run north and south. So we're really a north-south county. And right in the middle of this county is this very, very large project that has some significant issues. Now, I want to talk about the legal issues. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a comedian. So his job is to make you laugh. My job is to make you cry. And that's what lawyers do, unfortunately. But there are some actions that are taken. And as Kristen pointed out, I am representing the group that is recalling the mayor of the city of Port Washington. And before, some people think, well, why would you do such a thing? It's the mayor. But I want to point out to all of us, like I was saying, when I was in this room a couple of years ago, we were dealing with election issues, and there were some very serious issues, and the people were very, very upset. And I pointed out to that audience, and maybe some of you were in that audience, that we are the people and we are the sovereigns in this state, and we have a democracy that allows us to elect representatives. And we send them off to the Common Council, and of course the mayor, and we send them to the state legislature, and all the way to Congress in Washington. But we are the democracy right here. And our democracy is limited to this, this idea that you put a little piece of paper through a machine and they count them all up, and theoretically it adds up. But this is the power. It's the people in this county. And when you think about something this big, this should have been a general discussion. And when it moves from the people to the Common Council, we have an absolute right to expect that our representatives will perform their duties in such a way that they represent our interests. And if you, and if you look at state law, it makes it very clear that that's an open process, that we can go and we can go to the meetings and we can watch them, and their papers are public papers. They're our papers. It's not the Common Council's papers. They're our papers. And all of this should be a transparent process. But when you can fill a room like this on a Wednesday night with people who are really concerned about this development, that suggests that system isn't working. And that's why the lawyers are involved. So I want to briefly tell you what we're up to, and then I want to talk about the Public Service Commission's perspective on what we're looking at from an energy perspective. So we have the recall. Why do we do it? It's because there's a constitutional right in Wisconsin that we can recall our elected officials. It's a constitutional right. It's not granted by statute or local ordinance. The Constitution says if we elect someone and that person isn't living up to what we expected, we can recall them. And this is the process. And that's why nobody involved in this should be criticized. We are executing our constitutional right to do what we are allowed to do, is say, we don't like what you're doing, we're going to recall you. Now, we have to collect the signatures, and if we get them, there'll be an election, and that's the process, because the people get a do-over. That's what a recall is. It's a do-over. We see it in school boards, you see it in common councils. This is our right. It's not to be criticized. It's our execution of our right. And that's why I got involved in this. Most of my practice is administrative law. I spent 10 years in administrative, working for the government, state and county. But this is a very important right, and that's why we want to think about this. Let the voters decide. Should that person stay in office? or given a second chance, or should we move on and bring somebody else in? So don't criticize that. We're executing our constitutional right. There are also litigation involved in this TID situation. That's a tax incremental district. And I think as Prescott pointed out, the economics of these things are really strange. We want to bring business into the community and create jobs and economic development. So you give them a tax break. But when you're not creating jobs and you're not creating economic excitement, but you have this box that's sitting there sucking electrons in and producing heat, which is cooled by the lake, there's no benefit to that. So the question is that the proper vehicle? And of course, that is being challenged in court. Attorney Joe Sincata is handling that issue. It's an important issue. Another issue we have is that we have an open meetings law in Wisconsin. And that means that whenever government meets, it has to be noticed to the public so that people can come and hear and listen and see. Well, allegations, of course, that these open meetings did not happen. They're closed-door meetings. And when you have a representative form of democracy where we send representatives behind closed doors, this is what we get. It doesn't matter if it's here or Washington, Madison, and that's a real problem. If they violated the open meetings requirements, then they need to be held accountable for that, because we cannot have secret government. There's also First Amendment violations. You know, this is not a government board. We don't have to notice this. We're not the government. But if you come to the Common Council chamber, there's time, place, and manner restrictions where you have to kind of behave yourself. You can't go in there and disrupt the process of local government. But when you see video on television at night on the news of a citizen being pulled out in handcuffs, dragged across the floor because somebody's going to basically express their First Amendment right, they don't like this plant. That's scary stuff. And I think we really need to be cognizant of that in Port Washington and Mequon, Cedarburg, Grafton, wherever you live, that people have a right. Sheboygan as well, we'll include them. But the point is, we have a right. If we are so afraid to go into our Common Council and express our opinion, that's not democracy. That's not freedom. You're the serf and they're the rulers. You don't want that. We want to be able to go in there. Another issue that I deal with quite a bit in my elections practice is we go to the elected officials and the city governments and we say, hi, we'd like to see the election records. And they say, no, go away. You're a tinfoil hat crazy. Leave us alone. Then we leave, and if we don't leave, they call the police, so we leave, and then we go to the courthouse and we file a writ of mandamus, which is where the court, the judge in your county, will tell the government that you give those people those records, because we have open records laws in Wisconsin that are very broad. People have a right to see the government papers because they're our papers. Well, that is happening here in this county as well. We're now in Ozaukee County Court. There's a lawsuit, I'm not involved, and we're asking the court, they are asking the court, please show us the records, and the government should show us the records. And we'll see how that goes as well. There's also the issue before the Public Service Commission. One of the special interest law firms are dealing with how transmission works in the state. And this is where I'm going to shift gears. I spent 3 years on the Public Service Commission in Madison as one of the 3 members. I was appointed by Governor Tommy Thompson. And at that time, we had vertically integrated utilities. That means generation, and then transmission, and then distribution. And it's all vertically integrated. And we would analyze all the numbers, and we would set the rates. Of course, nobody liked the rates going up, but that's how we regulated utilities, because they have an obligation to serve all customers with electricity in their monopoly territory. And they have an obligation to serve, and then the government gives them a monopoly. But then the government, the Public Service Commission, regulates how much money they can make, or they would charge to infinity. At that time, somebody got the great idea to spin out the transmission component and privatize it, take it out of the regulatory environment, still owned by the same regulated utilities. But the Transco is different than the utility. It's a different legal entity, and it's somewhat outside of regulation. So what we're dealing with this situation across the state, but here, is that we have to bring power into this plant to run it. And it takes a massive amount of electricity to run this data plant, which is really scary. I've seen news reports where they say it's more electricity than all the households in Wisconsin. It's one plant. That's a lot of electricity, and it's all has to be brought in because, you know, the little coal plant, or I should say natural gas plant we have in Port Washington, I was on the commission at the time. That was Power of the Future, and I voted yes, convert that from coal to natural gas because coal emits mercury. I was not a fan of mercury at all. I said, it's better to be natural gas. Well, that is not anywhere near enough electricity to run this gigantic plant. So what are they doing? They're running these power lines. They're going to bring more power in to feed this plant, okay? But the problem is, this isn't the only plant. If you follow the news, you see that Microsoft wants to build 15 of these down at the Foxconn deal. Remember Foxconn? You know, the governor was there. They cut the ribbon. President Trump flew in. They cut the ribbon. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. It's still sitting there. So now what they want to do is build more data centers. So the point is, in Wisconsin, if you look at how we are structured from a utility perspective, you have Green Bay and then Crivets to Door County. That power is generated and it comes down the Fox Valley along the coast through Milwaukee and into Chicago. And on a hot day, when Chicago is cooking and all the air conditioners are running, we've always had this draw. It's physics. It pulls the electrons south, down towards Chicago. Well, nobody's talking about new generation. They're just talking about bringing more power in. But here's the thing. When you think about a hot day and the utilities have to make decisions about reliability, there are plans in place that they've had forever that they will start to shed load. You get the big industrials like Charter Steel and others, they have these interruptible loads. But when it gets critical, the residential customer goes first. Yeah, cut them off because we can't have the grid go down. And then you've got to keep the hospitals and the nursing homes going, and you must keep the data centers going. You can't shut that down. So the point is, we the people, the citizens, you know, your taxes are going to be going up and all the rest of it. But your power is at risk because there aren't enough electrons in the state to power all of these plants statewide. But they don't tell you that. But you know, when you talk to your Public Service Commission people, and there's 3 of them, that's a really big concern. It was a big concern with Homeland Security and terrorism. Well, what happens is we get more and more of these data centers, they're not shutting them off. They're shutting you off more often. That's why you see more people buying these home generators. You know, our power in Mequon has been off 4 times in the last year, so here I am shelling out money to buy a generator because they have an obligation to serve for their monopoly. And 4 times, I'm out of power. So it's money out of pocket because it's shifting the interest from the people to the plants, to the bigger institutional plants. And that's a real problem. And when you talk about that many electrons in a black box, there's nobody working inside of there other than maybe the maintenance people. That's a lot of electrons coming in. And if you know, when I was on the commission, we looked at electromagnetic radiation coming off of transmission lines. It's a big deal. If you live too close to the transmission lines, data suggests that leukemia rates go up because there are electric currents. You know, if you know anything about electricity, it's a current, and around the current is a loop. If you're a dairy farmer, you know all about stray voltage. These things are not without consequence, and nobody has really taken the time to think about what happens when you put that much electricity in that box. And maybe that's the reason why there aren't anybody building next door to these things. You know, don't your spoons sticking to the wall all day. It's a lot of electricity. And the other issue you got is you're pulling water out of Lake Michigan to cool it. It's okay, take it, cool it, put it back in the lake. But so does the gas plant. And when you think about Port Washington's harbor and the tradition of not only commercial fishing, but sport fishing and just recreation in general, that's a lot of thermal load, and that was a big issue with the nuclear power plants. You know, how much thermal pollution are we putting in the lake? Well, you think about the Great Lakes, and we're not the only state that's doing this, and at some point you have to start asking the questions. This should have been debated. There should have been an environmental impact statement. We should be thinking about it, because we got this little county, and this is a big deal. So I think, you know, ultimately, it's time to start asking these questions is not after the permits are let and the deals are cut. It should have been a public discussion. And in closing, there's one thing that really bothers me more than anything else. I have a client today that I've been working with for a long time on election-related issues for data. And this client is working with Apple Computer. And this client tells me that they can take a desktop computer and do about 90 to 95% of what that plant is going to do plugged into the wall on a desktop computer. Now, what this tells me, and if you know anything about technology, when I was driving back and forth from Mequon to Madison on the PSC, I had a cell phone. It was in a bag, and it had a handset and a little antenna on it. I was so cool. This was amazing. But it's obsolete technology. I have a Mac Classic in my basement that I guess the Smithsonian might want someday. It doesn't work. If you have old cell phones, technology changes very rapidly. I think it's called Moore's Law, that every so often technology changes. And it is my suspicion that these plants will be obsolete before they're paid for. We are building dinosaurs. Yeah. And that's a problem because it's billions of dollars to build a dinosaur. And you think, oh, that's pie in the sky, that's tinfoil hat. Well, let's look at Foxconn, okay? We're not making this up. This is what we're dealing with. If we're building dinosaur plants that are going to be obsolete in 10 years because people with software and Apple computers getting into the space, what are we doing? And who's going to buy that? And there's no plan B to clean it up. Nobody's going to tear it all down and restore the land. It's just going to sit there. We've got Cash Toy in Mequon that's been sitting there since the 1980s vacant. Nobody knows what to do with it. It's in our industrial park. Nobody knows what to do with it for 35 years. This is a real problem, and it should have been discussed at the Common Council level. It should have been discussed among the people in public hearings. That's what we do at the Public Service Commission. We listen to the people. So it's something to think about, and I'm very thankful that so many of you have showed up today and tonight to consider all of these issues, because there are issues. So anyway, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. We really appreciate all of your expertise and background on that. Now we're going to move on to our next speaker, Dr. Medhavi Ambardar. Dr. Medhavi Ambardar is the chief scientist at the Lake Michigan Bird Observatory in Port Washington, Wisconsin, where she oversees general operations and research conducted by the observatory. Previously, she was a biology professor at Fort Hays State University, where she taught classes, mentored students, and conducted research. Her research interests focus on understanding how reproductive success in birds is influenced by numerous factors, including behavior, habitat, physiology, and carryover effects. Medhavi earned her BS in biology from Michigan Tech University, her MS in biology from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and her PhD in zoology from Oklahoma State University. So let us give a big round of applause to Dr. Ambardar. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to lower this because I'm a little bit shorter than the other people who have been here. So I'm Medhavi Ambardar. As Christine mentioned, I'm the chief scientist of the Lake Michigan Bird Observatory. We are a hometown nonprofit right here in Port Washington. Yes, thank you. We are all about advancing bird conservation through research, through monitoring, and through education. So we're going to kind of take a look at things from the environmental side, but specifically thinking about birds. So I was told when I was asked to speak tonight that you all like birds. Is this true? Yeah. All right. Yeah. So we think about birds. It seems like kind of like this. Whatever. But why do we care about birds? Does anybody have a bird feeder in their yard? Raise your hand. Yeah. Anybody go bird watching for fun? A lot of people. Anyone hunt ducks, pheasants, turkeys? Yeah, few people do. So birds are important to us for recreation and for enjoyment, for food sometimes. Birds are economically important. So there are a lot of tourism dollars that go into people traveling to specific places to see birds. We are in one of the great places to see sandhill cranes in the summertime. I'm sure you've seen those guys. We've got a lot of great warbler diversity in the spring and fall, so there's a lot of great birding out here. So we care about birds for a lot of reasons. From a conservation standpoint, birds are declining really rapidly. We have lost over 3 billion birds since 1970. That is a lot. And there's a lot of reasons why this is happening. There's a lot of different threats that affect birds. Things like habitat loss, things like collisions with windows and other structures, light pollution, noise pollution, toxins. So we're going to hear a little bit about those tonight as well. One of the really important things about not just Port Washington, but think about the entire lakeshore of Wisconsin along Lake Michigan. So if you're a bird and you're migrating, you're flying south, maybe you're coming down from Canada, you're coming down from the UP, you're flying over the Great Lakes. Those are big bodies of water. We call them lakes, but really they're freshwater inland seas. You don't want to fly over that. That's not super safe. So a lot of birds will shift over and fly over the lake shore. So the lake shore itself is really important for birds. A lot of birds will stop along different spots on the lake shore. You ever go on a long road trip and you stop at like a gas station or things like that? You go get snacks, load up on food and stuff like that. Anyone ever do that? That's what birds are basically doing at these stopover sites. So they're stopping there. They are eating food. They're resting. They're hiding from predators. So it's really important that we provide high quality habitat along the lakeshore for these migrating birds. But in addition to habitat, again, you're a bird, you're migrating. How are birds finding out where they go? They use a lot of different cues in the environment. Some of those include the stars. They'll use the position of constellations of the stars at night. What kinds of things affect our ability to see the stars? Can you see the stars when you're in the city versus when you're out in the country? Big difference, yeah. So that's light pollution. Yeah, light pollution. So light pollution affects migration. It also affects a lot of different things other than just migration. So it's not just during migration when light pollution can be a problem. Like us, birds have circadian rhythms. Anyone know what a circadian rhythm is? Yeah, it's kind of like your sleep-wake cycle. Yeah, so birds have that as well. Light pollution affects our circadian rhythms. That causes physiological stress. And I hate to tell you this, guys, but stress kills. You know, you think about things like heart disease, diabetes, all these things are affected by stress, and those kinds of things affect birds too. It's not just during migration. Light pollution affects birds all throughout the year. Noise pollution, same kind of situation. So birds rely on a lot of acoustic cues, so being able to hear each other in order to communicate. Noise affects that. It changes how they communicate with each other. We see effects of stress again, things like that. So there's a lot of things to consider, and this is not just a data center problem. This is kind of a development problem in general. There's a lot of considerations that need to be thought of with these kinds of builds. So I am a scientist. I don't know, a whole lot about, kind of the other realm of things. I've spent the last over 20 years of my life as a scientist, but as a scientist, I'm also a skeptic. So I'm going to encourage you to kind of join me a little bit in that skepticism. So there's a lot of things that you might hear about some of the things that the data center is doing. If this data center goes in, we would like to see it be as bird-friendly as possible. And that does include things like thinking about light, thinking about the amount of noise that's being produced, thinking about just kind of the entire footprint of the structure. But this is one of those things where you don't know until it happens. So this is what I mean about being skeptical. We need evidence. We need to see that this is actually a possibility. Traditionally, that is not what we see with these kinds of buildings, these kinds of structures. They tend to be pretty noisy. There tends to be quite a bit of light. They take up a big amount of space, and that harms, the environment in general, but that harms birds as well. So thinking about things that people can do is, first of all, just take note of what you're seeing. So being a community member scientist, We do have a lot of information about birds, but we don't really know how they are affected by something like a data center, something like any of these other kinds of similar builds. We just don't know. We need that data. If you've got bird feeders, if you're a birder, anything like that, collect that data. Talk to others about it. Share what you're seeing. That's really, really important. Also think about, okay, where you live. Am I able to build habitat for birds where I live? Can I put in some native plants? Can I reduce the amount of light that I'm using? Can I put out feeders for birds that are going to help them during the cold months, like what we've got right now? So thinking about those things as well. And again, I just kind of want you to, like I said, think about being a community scientist, being skeptical, and watch out for birds. Just think about, what's happening with them. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And actually that ties in really well to one of our initiatives that we are starting as well and we'll be rolling out in phases, which is our citizen science monitoring program, where we want people to, as Dr. Ambardar just mentioned, record, monitor what you're seeing, and we do have on our website. We do have a link, a button that I'll throw up later on, where you can see. You can click on that and enter your observations for what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, smelling, air quality, birds, any sort of changes around you that you want to report. So that ties in very, very well into that initiative. Thank you so much for raising that. And our next speaker is Cheryl Nenn. We welcome Cheryl Nenn. She has been the Riverkeeper for Milwaukee Riverkeeper for over 23 years. As the Milwaukee Riverkeeper, Cheryl patrols local waterways, identifies problems in the Milwaukee River Basin, responds to community concerns, reviews permits, and helps find collaborative solutions to problems affecting local rivers. Cheryl also leads several water quality monitoring programs, the Milwaukee Urban Water Trail Project, and several stream restoration projects in the Milwaukee River Basin. Cheryl has a BS in biology from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and an MS in natural resource ecology and management from the University of Michigan, School of Natural Resources and the Environment. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you. Thanks, friends. Well, thanks everybody. I really appreciate everybody who came out tonight. It's really important for you to be, to just be with your neighbors and learn about these data centers. They're obviously proliferating really quickly and rapidly across the country, especially in the Great Lakes states. There's about 525 data centers right now that are popped up all around the Great Lakes, and that's about 20% of the U.S. data centers. And the Great Lakes are 20% of the world's fresh surface water and about 95% of the U.S. fresh surface water supply. And so why a lot of these data centers are accumulating in our area is a couple things. One, obviously the water. We have that 95% of the U.S. fresh surface water, like right out the back here. But we also have a cold climate, and so that helps a lot with cooling these facilities, whether it's air cooled or water cooled. And so that's in part why we're seeing a lot of the proliferation. Okay, so we have been following this for quite a while, as well as the Microsoft facility in Racine. Originally, and I'm just going to say, obviously, I'm going to be focusing mostly on water, and I'll try to be quick. But the Cloverleaf, who was the original developer of this project, was estimating that there'd be about 1.2 million gallons of water per day that was going to be used, and that those numbers have changed significantly, obviously, since that time. But that was even back in April of last year. We were getting those numbers. The new number in August with Vantage is that they're saying this is going to be a fully closed loop system with no cooling towers, basically no evaporative loss, 0 gallons of water, other than however much it takes to fill it up in the first place. But they're basically saying they're going to use about 22,000 gallons of water per day, which is incredibly low, pretty equivalent to what a commercial entity in Port Washington is probably using now. That will mostly be used for bathrooms and water use, effectively very little on the industrial side. They are claiming, though, I think still that they need that 1.2 million gallons of water per day. And their materials that they submitted to the Department of Natural Resources, they said they're going to need that for firefighting purposes, which means the pipe has to be big enough to basically send that amount of water in case, of catastrophe. But that's essentially what's being proposed right now. I think it's really important, and others have mentioned this, that doesn't include the amount of water that's going to be used and taken out of the lake for power generation. And in the case of this facility, as well as the Microsoft facility in Racine, we're largely using, fossil fuels to be fueling these facilities. And so it's an incredible amount of water that's being used in what we call that indirect water use, which is being used in the basically generating electricity for the facility. And around 65% of the water that's used every year from the Great Lakes is for power generation. And so that is where a lot of the water comes into play and for a lot of these facilities, even a facility like the one being proposed here, which is pretty decent as far as minimizing the amount of water that they're planning to use. The port, as you guys all know, I think the water treatment facility has about a 4 million gallons per day capacity. Because they have to provide up to, this million gallons of water and potentially much more than that with expansions, they're going to have to likely upgrade that facility so that it can be at least 5 to 6 million gallons per day, and that is going to be about a $4 to $6 million cost. I know the city's still looking at that. I heard earlier today that they've already increased rates 65% on the water side. A couple of years ago, that was already approved by the Public Service Commission. So, these are costs that we think really should be borne by Vantage, borne by the data center, and not borne by citizens. Wastewater estimates too, thank you, I agree. Wastewater estimates too, they were originally saying we're going to be at about 300,000 gallons per day, and those have come way down to about 13,000 gallons per day. That's, and so I think I have quite a lot of skepticism of those numbers, but, they are, I think on the low side compared to even Microsoft, which is, I think right now saying even with this new 15 buildings that they're putting up there, it's about a $15 billion project down there now. They're saying that's going to be about 8 million gallons of water per year. So what's in the wastewater is important to know. I already mentioned that, a lot of this they're saying is largely going to be human waste, water that's being used by employees who are working at the facility. They will also be adding propylene glycol, which is essentially used for cooling. And that percentage of that glycol will depend based on the temperature outside. That will have to be regularly replenished. It's a toxic chemical, and it would be essentially contracted to someone to take off site and deal with it there. They are saying in their materials that they've submitted to DNR that once a year they're going to be draining this system to essentially clean the strainers and service filters, things like that. And so that will result in, quite a lot of contamination, which are things like biocides, that basically kill bacteria, pH adjusters, corrosion inhibitors, which are often really high in nutrients, essentially stopping, lead and metal from getting into the water. And so that will be discharged annually to the wastewater plant. I think that is something that Port Washington needs to pay attention to as far as ensuring that there's a good pre-treatment permit so that we're limiting the amount of toxins that are getting into the treatment plant and into the lake. And as the other gentleman mentioned too, there's, potentially a large thermal load with that water as well, which can be very hazardous to fish and aquatic life. So that's something that we'll definitely be wanting to pay close attention to. Wetland impacts, it's hard to probably see this map, but this is all the little blobs on here that you might see are wetlands that are largely going to be damaged by this project. It ends up being about 4.7 acres of wetland. That won't be there to provide wildlife habitat for the birds, but also, are very important to protecting water quality and reducing flood risk, things like that. So that's a concern. They're saying that there's going to be no direct stream impacts or impacts to downstream waters. Definitely there's stormwater issues. I think they're planning several wet detention basins, and it sounds like there's already been some issues reported by the community. A lot of, dust and dirt and, type of solids getting out of the construction site. So those are also things that I think would be good as far as like Christine was just talking about with citizen monitors, just really paying attention to, documenting any kind of erosion or runoff that's coming off the site. Those are really important things to keep track of as the construction goes forward, and something that you can work with DNR and the city to improve, to make sure that we are protecting the waterways as part of the construction. I think, as others have mentioned, we also have very serious concerns about the ATC electric transmission lines that are being proposed for this project. That's $8 billion for that project. Regardless of the alternative that they pick, would harm like dozens of streams and wetlands, regardless of what's picked there. So, and these are very high quality streams. We have several trout streams, the North Branch of the Milwaukee River, the Onion River, portions of the Sheboygan River, and many creeks, Mole Creek and Mequon, Cedarburg area, a lot of very high quality creeks that would be impacted by this project. And so there will be winners and losers. Some people are going to have these things in their backyard, other people that might not be on the route that's selected, but there's still really serious concerns with that. Okay, so, I think as another speaker mentioned, a lot of this really is a political problem and a legislative problem. And unfortunately, our agencies and our cities have really, been caught flat-footed here without any way to regulate these projects. And so there's a lot that's already obviously happening, a lot of construction, but there are still, things that can be done and must be done to protect other communities and also to protect this community from potential future phases of this project. As other speakers have mentioned, the subsidies and the tax breaks, and those are very concerning. Those come at the cost of public health. That's an opportunity cost, hundreds of millions of dollars that aren't being put into your pipes, your drinking water pipes, your infrastructure. We're told in Milwaukee and Racine we can't afford to, change out lead pipes, but we can put in 60 miles of pipe into the Microsoft facility. 60 miles of pipe they're putting in. Those are choices. Those tax credits, the tax breaks, all of that is a choice. That's money that's not going into other infrastructure that we need. There needs to be a water permitting process. I think we're lucky here in Port and in Milwaukee and Racine that we are next to this Great Lake. There are other data centers that are being put in parts of the state, using groundwater resources where they're directly competing with residential wells. And anytime groundwater is used, you're going to have impacts on streams and wetlands and water resources as well. So there should be a permitting system where DNR has public hearings. They require a permit. They ensure that the waters of the state are protected as part of these projects. Water efficiency and sustainability standards should be required, including water conservation plans for all of these facilities. And again, as Charlie and others have mentioned, transparency is key. Accounting. We had to sue the city of Racine to just find out how much the Microsoft facility was using or planning to use, and it really shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't have to sue our own government to get this information. They should be very forthcoming with the amount of water and energy and that they're using, and also the impacts to the community. So I think that's really paramount. Pretreatment standards, water quality testing and reporting will be really important. And, I think as others have said, these data centers really should be paying up front for all of the energy and all of the water costs. And I also think we need really strong enforcement mechanisms if problems, pop up. I think I just want to end here by saying, there's several bills right now that are running around in the state. There's like a Democrat bill and a Republican bill. I think there's good provisions in both of them. I do think that they need to get together and pass some legislation here. And the best time to do that would have been 5 years ago, but the next best time is tomorrow. So they need to, get with it and pass some legislation here because, we're in dire need of some leadership, and we really need it to protect our natural resources. And I think we can do it in a way where we're also moving the state forward, but also protecting our communities and protecting our waterways. So thank you.
Excellent, wonderful. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Thank you. Our final speaker is for the evening is Paula Pintar. Paula currently serves as a regional infection preventionist with the Wisconsin Department of Public Health in the Healthcare Associated Infection Prevention Program. She currently serves on the board of directors for the National Association for Professionals of Infection Prevention and Epidemiology. Paula has more than 2 decades of experience working as a registered nurse in critical care, hospice, and home care, and more than 10 years in infection prevention and control. She is from Caledonia and was part of the early organizing effort that led to Microsoft walking away from its proposed data center in Caledonia. Paula, thank you.
So, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. So probably my bio least fits the why would I be speaking at a data center meeting. But as my said, right now I currently work for the Wisconsin Department of State Health, and I'm not presenting on behalf of them. My presenting is as a concerned healthcare professional, and my views and information are based on my personal investment in this from our Caledonia project that we were invested in. And just to follow along the union lines, I'm not anti-union. I grew up in a union house and I married a union man, so go unions. Yep. So one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit tonight, and I could probably go on for hours on each one of these, is we've heard the previous speakers, and they each have some glimmering things that focus or touch on healthcare impacts of living with data centers. And it's very interesting how this has continued to evolve. So tonight I want to just touch a little bit about what those health risks are, and each phase of the development of a data center has in its inherent health risks that affects our community and our individuals and our environment. So looking at the development of a data center, there's basically 5 phases of construction. So you've got the pre-construction, the construction, your activation, production, and a lot of things go up and down that linear development. So you're going to have impact to noise and water and the sound and those types of things. So I want to focus on the activation and the production phases of data centers. So we talked about the water use and the emissions from diesel generators. You're not going to get away from that. Right now you need backup fuel sources for your production phase, and once that data center is activated, you're also going to need those diesel generators. And with that comes the emissions of the fine particulate matters that is exhausted with those. We've heard a little bit about the impacts of light and how that changes. Right now, you're working around the clock, and so you've got to have light, you've got to have power for those workers to see. So that's going to impact the whole community. It's not just around that construction zone. And the noise I'll talk about a little bit about further along. But there is literally the downstream effects of all of this work that is being done, and it is all affecting the community and the members of the community. On this table, I just wanted to reference and give an idea of, this is focused on the noise levels, and so often the yellow highlighted ones are common equipment that are being used in development of the data center. So you've got your bulldozers, your heavy duty trucks, and the pile drivers. If that hasn't started already, that's going to be a significant impact once those are starting to be implemented. And the decibel levels are all in the higher levels. When you're speaking in a normal conversation, the decibel levels are between 50 and 70 decibels. And so like another reference point is if you're washing machine in your home, that's about a 70 decibel level. But when you have that consistent high levels of decibels that are going in the sound barriers, you can see it's 5 meters to 10 meters. They don't really deteriorate a whole lot. And when you have that ongoing multiple factors, you're not just having one of these elements at one time. You're having multiple heavy equipment running at one time. You're going to have those pile drivers going. So it's a culmination of the impact that affects the community. And it's not only, it's going to disrupt your groundwater. What is that doing to the groundwater? The vibration. Think about your plumbing structures. You have biofilm that is in all of our plumbing structures. So that constant vibration is going to loosen and disengage some of that, which leads to other water quality issues, Legionella issues, and I could go on for hours on that as well. But I think it's, no, sorry. So that are part of the health impacts that we are trying to be more aware of, and how is that going to affect us. So the other part, talking about the air quality, we know that digital smog is part of the fallout from the data centers. So we have direct impact, as I mentioned earlier, from those on-site diesel generators. And we also have that from the natural gas plants and from the electrical wires. We're also going to have impacts from the fallout from that. The indirect sources are, what are we going to rely on for creating that energy? Because we, as we've heard earlier tonight, we don't have enough capacity or infrastructure to maintain the number of data centers that are in place and that are continuing to build. So the other part, when we talk about particulate matter, the PM 2.5, that is a non-threshold level of pollution, which means that there is no safe level. We have the nitrogen oxides, which are also labeled as the silent killers. And these are listed as the second highest risk factor for non-communicable diseases. And as I mentioned, the downstream effect, these are significantly impacted by air currents. So it's not just our community here in Port Washington or Beaver Dam. The air is going to carry these pollutants across state lines. They don't care where the state line is. It's going to impact communities outside of our Wisconsin area. And so there's going to be a significant increase in those pollutants. There currently is monitoring through the state, and that's through the DNR, and they're held to EPA standards. One of the things is that, and I have posed this to our state health department, what are we doing to change our surveillance measures and metrics with all of the data center expansions? And I have not yet received a real solid answer on that. And what I'm afraid of is that we're not the only state health department that is not really taking this into consideration. I had reached out to Virginia, which is the hub of data centers in our country, and I did not even get a response from them. So what we are doing right now for surveillance for air pollutants is probably the basic of what we are required to do. And so one of the asks and action items is to get this as part of legislation. How are we monitoring the air quality and water quality that is going to be impacted by the upload of these data centers in our communities? And how are we going to mitigate some of those risks? This visual, again, just looks at how the air pollutants affect us, and it really affects every system of our body. And so it's the endocrine, it's the neuro, it's the cardiac, and it's respiratory. And we all know that there are other modifications or within our health of our population, is that if you have comorbidities, if you have a cardiac condition, if you have a respiratory condition, asthma, COPD, these are going to be significantly impacted when these data centers are in full functionality. And it's not the elderly are going to be impacted, the children, the young children are going to be impacted, but it's really going to affect all of us. The other thing with these particulate matters, and this is a reference to show you a size. So when you have particulate matter of 2.5, it's extremely, extremely small. Compared to this longer diagram on this picture, that is a reference as a human hair. So it gives you an idea of the size of these particulate matter. And so they are easily inhaled. So if you're working in the environment, if you're working on the construction site, you are going to be more at risk for breathing in the dust particles that have natural organisms in them, but that is also spreading to the community. I don't know, I'm sure you've seen on the TV the last couple of nights, the lady here in Port Washington, where she's wiping the dust off of her counters in her side of her house and wearing a mask inside of her house. So that's just the dust that is happening. That's not even the fine particulate matter that's going to be added to the environment once these data centers are in functioning. And that's not going to go away. And that's going to also be from the backup generators that are going to be required to be tested on a regular basis, and also to show that they have sustainability to maintain electrical backup systems. So they're not going to run for an hour or two and be shut off. They're going to be major diesel generators that are going to have to be fired up and run for an extended period of time. So you have that on top of what is being generated from the power grid source. So what happens at the end of the life for data centers? We've heard a little bit about that as well. But from the healthcare perspective, this is something that also is very concerning for me as a healthcare professional. So currently, we are seeing a rapid need for AI hardware to refresh its cycles. And normally, before the big boom had hit, it was 5 to 7 years that would be regenerated. Right now, with the pressure that's on for data centers, it's been compressed to 18 to 36 months. And what that means is the hardware within those data centers is already being thrown out in the trash because it's already seen its lifespan, it's already lost its utility. So when that happens, what happens to all that data? We, to this day, don't have strong infrastructure requirements or regulations or standards put in place for transfer of that data. And what worries me is about the healthcare data, and I think, Charlie, you alluded to where is that data going? We already have ransom for healthcare systems that have to pay big money when their data is stolen by outside black actors, thank you. And so right now, when all of that data is going to be housed in those warehouses, and it's not just healthcare, it's every entity is going to have to use data because that's the technology of our generation. Everybody's buying into it. So it's going to be every facet of life is going to be tied somehow to an AI data center. But when it comes to your healthcare, there's the HIPAA requirements. And so when that is disposed, who's doing the disposing and what is that chain of custody for that data that's there? That also gets into the e-waste recycling. So all of that hardware components have metal and copper and gold, but they also have about 1,000 other chemicals that are in those hardware devices. And so when that is disposed of, where is that disposal going? A lot of companies don't want to pay for the disposal, and they don't want to refurbish it because it's easier just to offload it. But where is that being offloaded to? Oftentimes, it's being sent over in container ships to third world countries and let them deal with it and fill up their landfills, but then their people are exposed to it because then they're dismantling that, so you're exposing people again, that downward drift of the risks to other people. You know, we're all humans and we should all have safety and not have to worry about that. So the community health impacts, this is where it all comes together for me. We've all had different topics we've all kind of focused on, but to me it all comes back to the essence of our health, of our communities and our individuals. And so what we've talked about tonight are all aspects of our social determinants of health. It's where you live, where you work and play, and where you age. And we are impacting that environment and our homes in a negative way with this boon of AI data centers. And don't get me wrong, I understand that, again, this is our technology evolution, and we're not going to get away from it, but how do we do do it smartly? How do we do it safely? And I'm not against people having jobs, but a lot of this is going to take away our jobs. And even in healthcare, that's a topic of conversation. How much, and to me, healthcare is very humanistic, and you can't get too far removed from that personal touch. And right now, we're already on a treadmill that, if you get 15 minutes with your physician, you've had a lot of time. It's going to get worse because they're already expanding out. How can we do more outside of having that one-on-one, face-to-face? What can we do remotely? What can we do tied to that information flow? And it affects the mental health of our communities. It affects the environment, and we're going to see that job loss, we're going to see that unemployment, and again, those are all social determinants of health, and where does that downflow stop? So one of the other things, to not just say, here's all the problems, but what are we going to do to fix this? So I'm also a member of the American Association of Nurses, and we have a Wisconsin chapter. And we have just recently developed a planetary health committee, if you will, which will be speaking at the Capitol, which is Nurses Day at the Capitol on the 24th, and bringing forward some of these things that are lacking. So really looking at our population density of how it's impacted by these pollutants, the PM2s and the nitrous oxides. Are we getting health impact studies? We've talked about other impact studies. We're not doing those. Where are our health impact studies for our communities? And looking at having some public health core metrics tied to these data centers and having that be part of the regulations and the accountability of these data centers. Standardized reporting and having the added as much pollutant-free energy sources as we can. So these are all things that have to happen, and we have to mobilize them quickly because we know how fast the data centers are mobilizing. So there's a lot here, and I've only touched on the tip of the iceberg, I think, for healthcare-related impacts to our communities, to our individuals. And unfortunately, I think we're going to know somebody that's going to have health-related concerns related to our data centers. The bad thing right now, although we do have some monitoring in place for pollutants, it's so generalized, it's very difficult to tie this pollutant to this health outcome. And so I think that's where we have to gain some specificity. And as a healthcare provider and recipient, that's something that I will be challenged to move forward, hopefully for the benefit of our communities. So with that, I guess I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Paula. That was a fantastic presentation by everyone. I also wanted to say that for me, that really hits home because I myself have a heart condition. Just a little over a year ago, I had an 8-hour open heart surgery performed. And so, I also am highly, highly concerned of the effects of pollutants. I do notice effects during the summers when we have especially the wildfire smoke, very high air pollution levels, right? I often have to stay inside. So, if we're noticing that, it's a high concern for a lot of us and hits really, really home. So I really thank you for mentioning that. Thank you. As well as mental health. We are seeing people already also stressed and distraught over effects that they're seeing right now as the construction has ramped up. So we need to be empathetic and understanding of everyone's experiences, even though not all of us have the same, cardiac or health, experiences. We all need to be empathetic and understanding of one another and support each other. So thank you for that. Great. And then I guess we'll take it away with the Q&A, but Matt?
So we're going to jump into the QA portion of the night. So just try to be respectful of everybody. Keep your questions brief. We've got a great panel here, and we'll just kind of go through and get the answers. I am going to make a plug while we're here. Like, if you're here, you're probably supportive of us. Sign the petition for the mayoral recall. If you're feeling motivated, which we hope you are, we really need help trying to be able to get to the last group of people, because we just don't have enough manpower to be able to go door to door. And I would actually say that even if you are pro data center and are opposed to a lot of what we talk about, I still think there's an argument for why you should support us, because realistically, we heard Prescott talk about the deal that was done here. Well, get new election, the mayor isn't really in a good position to be able to, renegotiate a deal that he did, right? But if we're able to get the common council replaced or enough of those members, well, then we can get a better deal. So I think regardless of which side of the fence you stand on, please support us and sign the petition, and even better yet, get out there and get some signatures.
Thank you. Wonderful. So we'll take some questions from the crowd, and we have one back here.
Hi, I'd like to thank you all for what you've done. Many of the people sitting near me, we live east on Lake Drive, so we're directly affected by this. The pollution, the light pollution, the dirt, but the birds, I'm not seeing the birds I used to see. I live near Sucker Brook. That's affected. So I have something for every one of the points that you all made, so I thank you very much. But one thing I wanted to bring up is they keep showing us this beautiful picture of this data center. And they don't ever seem to say that is phase one. That is the very tiny corner of this data center, starting at Port Washington and going up towards Lake Drive. That's 500 something acres out of a 1,900 acre proposed site. So I don't know if people know that. It looks beautiful, but that's a tiny portion. And I don't know where, talk about the power. Is all this power just for that one first phase? Are we going to go through this again next year and the year after and the year after? Thank you.
We've got one bit of a comment on that. If you think back to the 1970s, it was all the rage in America to build shopping malls, the indoor shopping malls. And everybody built them. The developers made a lot of money. It was a wonderful environment. But I live just north of Northridge, and we watched that being torn down. And it's had its day, and it's gone. But the construction dust is as bad today with them tearing it down as it was when they were building it. But the bigger question is obsolescence, and that's a really good question. If these are going in phases, and 5 years from now, software technology makes this stuff obsolete, you've got a stalled project that's just sitting there, and who cleans that up? And that's a really good question. How do you know what this looks like in 5 or 10 years without some sort of an economic study or an impact study? It's a very good question.
Hi, sorry, I'm Rebecca. I'm actually here from Sheboygan County. We're dealing with some similar issues. I wanted to thank the questions or the points made about health. One thing that we deal with in Sheboygan County, we have the worst ozone pollution in the state, and we're 24th in the nation. This has been going on since the 1990s, and I appreciate NOx isn't a good thing to breathe even when it's not ozone, right? My concern is, and I'm wondering how you folks have dealt with this. I had this question about Foxconn. How could Foxconn even move into this area with the pollution that we already have? Where were the permits? How does this work? So just to give you some context, because I need to get a life, I do have worked very closely with the DNR, the Air Management Study Group. They're a fantastic group. You can zoom into their meetings, and all of the utilities are there. Wisconsin Manufacturers, the Commons, Clean Wisconsin is there. They're trying to figure out what to do. In the last meeting, the DNR said that their Title V staff is completely underfunded. If you don't know what Title V is that big deal made in the Clean Air Act where we look at the big emitters, okay? Think power plants, think manufacturing companies that have their own power plants. We are no longer have enough staff to do permitting or inspections or compliance. We are on the verge of the EPA coming in, EPA Region 5, and taking over our Title V program. And it's not because the DNR doesn't want to. We haven't raised the fees to have enough staff to do this. That comes legislatively. The DNR just can't turn this around. I am surprised even the construction permits were allowed for this project in an area that has the worst air. I mean, the Lake Michigan, they call it the Cancer Crescent, right? From Door County down through Chicago, and there's a reason for that. And I, again, am not anti-growth. I'm just saying living on the Great Lakes comes with greater responsibility, right? And I understand clean water is necessary for manufacturing. I get it. And we have a lot of manufacturing in Sheboygan County. We are not Kenosha, okay? We have a lot of good industry in our community, and we don't need these kind of big developments that are gonna take away jobs from our industries that are already looking for jobs. So I don't understand this. There is a panic among a lot of our local legislators that we've got to build, baby, build, because we can't raise taxes. The point that was made in this election cycle is go to those assembly people that are running and say, will you please change the levy limits? They call it state's aid. No, it's revenue sharing. Okay, that's our money. Send it back so we can do the services that the state mandates that we do. Also, fund the DNR. I still want to work with somebody. I don't know how these permits are happening, even though they're going to say, well, we're only going to run the diesel generators once in a while for emergency purposes, so it's not a mobile source. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. These trucks are a mobile source. God bless you, but you are. And I'm telling you, they're harming their own workers. That's what I don't understand. So, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to, the size and scope of this project. It's pretty hard to comprehend actually how big this is. You talked about Northridge. Just the first phase of this is 3 Northridges. It's over 70 acres under roof. The second phase gets built, it'll be almost 150 acres of buildings. So it's a pretty big project, and it's hard to comprehend the magnitude of this thing. And I also wanted to ask the water lady, sorry, forgot your name, Cheryl. You mentioned propylene glycol. Do we know that it's propylene glycol, or is it ethylene glycol?
I can answer. I just read, so the process point that you made, or somebody made too, is very interesting, but I just got like a couple weeks ago, there was a FOIA request of all the DNR records. So the records that they submitted to DNR said propylene glycol.
Oh, okay.
And we asked about PFAS, because PFAS gas is something that a lot of data centers use as well, and they said they weren't using that. But they did mention the biocides, the anti-corrosion inhibitors, and propylene glycol in particular would be additives that would be likely in the wastewater. Okay. But I will say, as others have mentioned this too, there normally is an environmental impact statement or environmental assessment where the community learns about this. So you learn about all the alternatives. You can look at the apples to apples comparisons of the benefits and the costs. None of that happened with any of these projects because a lot of them aren't using federal or state money. It does seem like the state has done a little bit of what we call WEPA, which is a Wisconsin equivalent environmental analysis. But I wouldn't have been able to read any of the documents if we hadn't submitted them via a legal FOIA request. And so there weren't any public hearings as far as I know. There wasn't any, discussion about the environmental impacts, but there are documents that are out there. And I will say props to DNR. There are like I'm not as in tune with what's going on the air side, but on the water side, they asked a lot of questions and got a lot of good information back. But really all of this information should be much more publicly available.
But so Vantage is on the record as saying propylene glycol?
They are, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And do you know, with regard to these closed loop systems, how often they will periodically flush and dump certain portions of the loop and then have to refill it?
I'm not entirely sure. The one thing I read in their submission was that they said annually they were going to be cleaning the filters. And so I don't know if that's exactly equivalent to what you're saying, but they mentioned that they essentially were not going to be, I think only once a year they're going to be like flushing things and I guess replenishing with clean water and new additives. So I think the answer is annually, but that's just what I gleaned from reading their documentation.
And I think the loop capacity could be somewhere like an enormous number of gallons.
Yeah.
And if they periodically flush out one portion, that could be the reason for 1.2 million gallons of capacity.
Yeah, they are saying that they are going to be using 0 gallons of water, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But there is a number, right? That number exists. Like how much water is it going to cost to, fill up this? I don't know how many. I know that like the Microsoft facility, they said they're building 60 miles of pipes. I don't know what that is for Vantage, but like presumably that's a lot of water. Just even fill it up annually.
Thank you.
Yep.
Got a couple questions on cards. Are there any plans to require Vantage or OpenAI to open up for a town hall? I think the answer is just no. But you're looking at it, right? Just what we got here tonight. I think that's part of the reason we put this together, so I hope you all found it informative. Next question is, what is a better proxy for growth for local governments? A better proxy for growth. Yeah, this is you, I think.
Are you making me king for a day so I can change the legislation? Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. Population might be better, though there's not a formal calculation of that or a count of that often enough to matter. It's a tough problem to solve. I'll give them some credit for trying to protect taxpayers from whimsical tax increases by spendy politicians, but there's probably no perfect answer. I think if I were trying to solve the problem, I would add an inflation adjustment. That takes the edge off of the chasing of development.
There's $2 billion in the rainy day fund. Revenue share. Yeah.
I just have a few questions, and one is, has there been surveillance testing of the water, the air, so we have something to compare to? And is Vantage going to be paying for testing going forward for air quality, water quality, and all of the other things that we've been talking about, migration? I'm also wondering if in other areas that have the AI centers, has there been a study for birds, migration, and how that's been impacted? I think you might have mentioned that, but I don't remember. I moved to Milwaukee in 1980. I've been in River West for since '83, and there have been 2 Superfund sites that we're still waiting to be cleaned up, and there were many more, but there's still 2. So, they went belly up, the companies left, and we were left with the mess. So, and we're still paying for that.
I think it was Dan on the panel. I know there's a couple of opportunities before the Public Service Commission related to this project and more broadly to give feedback on the We Energy's proposal rates. In addition, the transmission power line, do we want A or do we want B? For somebody that believes either A or B is not the question, neither should be even considered. They're both bad options, and that the We Energy's proposal rate is not a good fit for anybody in here who's a We Energy's customer. How impactful is public impact on those opportunities to give feedback Does it really mean anything? Or what guidance could you give to anybody looking to have a meaningful impact on those opportunities?
Well, the Public Service Commission will conduct public hearings, and I think there have been public hearings on the transmission route. They regulate the route of the transmission lines, but when it comes to the pricing of transmission, that was carved out, and that's why I voted against it. It was a 3-person commission. All 3 of us were appointed by Governor Thompson. I voted no, and boy, did my phone light up. But the point is, this is what we have is an American Transmission Company is a company owned by utilities, but it's outside of the regulatory process. So they're not looking at the rates and the cost of transmission. They'll charge that back to the utility, and then that gets built into your rate indirectly. But the pathway, no matter which path they select to bring that power across, if that plant fails in 5 years or 10 years, you're going to have stranded assets in the transmission line that will be on your electric bill forever. And it's built into the rate you're paying per kilowatt from the utility, because that's their cost of doing business now, because it was deregulated. So it becomes a question of, are you overbuilding transmission lines to serve a plant that may be technologically obsolete before the 20 years is up and the TIF district starts to produce revenue for the city? We got nothing of substance out of that deal. That was the worst. What we should have done is, if you want to build the plant, you fund our schools for 50 years. Our sheriffs should be driving around in Rolls-Royce squad cars. We should have gotten something of big value to have to put up with this, and we got nothing. And we got nothing. So the question to the Public Service Commission is, why are you approving the route? And how do you know that those aren't stranded assets? And because there's no other load. I mean, Charter Steel is the big load, but Charter Steel is connected directly to the transmission lines that currently exist. That is by far the largest load in Milwaukee County, and frankly, on this part of the coastline. So if this doesn't work, who's going to pay for those stranded assets? And transmission lines are very expensive to build. And those questions should be asked to the Public Service Commission before they approve the route. Say, wait a minute, who's paying for that? And what's the plan B if you have overbuilt? Because stranded assets was a big deal when we were setting the rates. We never let the utilities build more generation and more transmission and even distribution and put that into the rate unless the rate base was growing. That we usually were subdivisions or commercial development where people keep the lights on, turn them off. All of that is factored into a traditional rate case of the Public Service Commission, and they have to be asked the question. If you're going to put the line in, and that cost is charged back to the utility, and the utility passes it through in the next rate case, we're going to be paying for stranded lines for a very long time. That has to be addressed.
Does the public feedback matter, though?
It does. It does. If you go to those hearings and you make a point to the commissioners, now it's an interesting flip. Back in the day when I was on the commission, we were all Tommy Thompson appointees. Well, now we have all Governor Evers appointees, and they're a bit more sensitive to the environment. I think you're going to have a more sympathetic heart. And we have to ask the question, if they're selling out to the big interests, what happened to all the environmental enthusiasm that we've heard for the last 30 years? Why are they selling out? I think that's a question to ask.
Email or in person?
Both. I would communicate, because keep in mind, these Public Service Commissioners are 3 members, and they work for the public. That's a full-time job, and you should be able to go in and petition your government. You have a right to petition your government. So get in there and petition politely. I mean, you don't want to be causing trouble, but those issues should be raised.
And actually, right now, you guys can submit your petition to the PSC, who is taking a public comment period is open until next Tuesday, I believe, but get it in sooner with respect to how much your power bills will go up as a result of this Vantage data center. Send your and when you send in your petition, We'll have a QR code, I think, at the end that sends them to a website for that. But it's the entire cost of the electricity. There's a lot of ways for the utilities to hide rates, so ask them to see the math. I got that from Prescott, you know. He said, don't say, trust me, bro, okay? I remember that. Yeah, but ask them to see the math. How are you doing this? You know, all the ways you do it, the lines, the connections, everything. But no cost should come back to the taxpayer. And did you want to answer the bird question answered earlier?
Yeah, thank you. So that was a really great question you had, kind of like pre, during, post, right, data collection. To my knowledge, there is no published study looking at that, and I think some of that is that AI data centers are kind of new. There might be research in the works. The Lake Michigan Bird Observatory is doing research on that, so you might be aware that the interurban runs right along the west side of the site. It's publicly accessible, so I went out and collected data, just some preliminary data, just to get that baseline information on birds as part of a larger study just looking at bird abundance in human-dominated and natural areas. And, you know, just so happened to have the site where now a data center is going in, and so we have a little bit of a change in the study. But that area, even though there is or was a lot of agricultural fields, is home to a lot of grassland birds, so sensitive species like dick thistles and eastern meadowlarks and bobolinks and things like that. So we do have some preliminary data on that. That research is going to continue. Again, the interurban's right there. I can walk it as much as I please and look at as many birds as I want. So that is the plan for the observatory, at least continuing that research. But as far as just kind of the broader scale, there's not really a whole lot out there. What we do know is, again, it's not data center specifically, it's human development. So we know about light pollution, we know about habitat loss, we know about toxins, we know about window collisions, we know about noise pollution. So using that as sort of the background to kind of formulate some of the research questions that come up from there.
I'll just say quickly on the water side, and I don't know if you want to jump in on the air side. I mean, we do have really robust water data for Lake Michigan and for the rivers. Like, we test 110 different locations with our volunteers. So we'll be able to assess kind of impacts from like the transmission lines. And those are concerning too, because those are like 80 to 120 feet swaths of forests often or grasslands that have to be completely removed to allow open space for these power lines, right? So that's bad for streams, for trout streams in particular. Add on climate change, the temperatures of our streams are warming up. That I feel fairly good that we'll be able to monitor those types of impacts. It's very hard, though, to measure the impacts directly of the data centers to water, because a lot of this will be indirect, right? They're getting their water through a water utility, they're returning their wastewater to your treatment plant. So a lot of it, what you'll see, are records from the treatment plant. And so that's one thing that I think a lot of us have questions about, like how are we going to be able to actually better monitor the impact, on kind of water quality from this data sector, And I think on the Microsoft side of things, they are building on an area that has water because it was, they got a diversion for Foxconn. So they need to count how much water is being diverted to the non-Great Lakes Basin side, how much water is being used. That has to be reported to all the Great Lakes states and provinces if it's over a certain threshold. So there's a lot of, I think, reporting and monitoring that will happen. I really don't have any sense if the data centers themselves are paying for any of that. They definitely should be.
So along the same lines with the air quality, so the DNR, if you get on the Wisconsin State Health Department, they also have a link to what the DNR is doing for monitoring for particulate matter. And right now there's a plethora of monitoring stations, but they also do a lot of modeling of that data. And it's annual data. So again, I don't think that it's on their radar to how impactful these data centers are going to be and how that is going to directly affect the public health outcomes. So that's one of the things I think we need to get introduced as part of those bills that are before the legislator. It's not just some guardrails for the data center, but what are the public health accountability measures that are going to be put in place for our communities. So that isn't even being addressed in any of the bills that are before the Senate right now. And again, there's very difficult to make that direct correlation from the air quality to your actual health outcome, unfortunately, at this point.
Great. We have one more question.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up Q&A pretty quick, so we'll take maybe one, maybe two more questions, and then after that, we do have a closing slide and we do have an ask for you, so please stick around.
Great. We'll do, let's see, I think her hand was first, so we'll do you, and then.
Hi, so my wife and I, we live in Port. Looking at me, you probably don't think I have any health issues, and I have a ton. I have to be careful with how much I drink because I go into AFib. I've blacked out and ended up in the emergency twice. I deal with migraines daily, endometriosis, knee pain, back pain, mental health issues, and so what. And I also think about others. I have close friends and family that I worry about their health issues. So this is a huge thing. I always think about the community and what other people deal with. So I'm glad that you brought up the health issues because I deal with it daily. And so now like this, I'm like, oh my God, another thing. And then I don't know if it's still there, but the mall in Manitowoc, isn't it still there like on the north side? Or is it torn down? Oh, okay, because I lived there in 2014 and it was still there. So, and then I also think my sister has 4 little kids. What about their futures? So I just think also people that have kids, what about their futures? We want to make sure they actually have futures. And so, yeah.
Wonderful. Great. I think actually there was one more over here. And in the meantime, too, if you're interested in submitting comments to the PSC, we have a flyer out there on the table you can pick up. And, yep.
Yeah, I just have a question about groundwater. A lot of us live in the township. We have our own wells. And so the concern is the data center going to be using any well water? Do they have any wells in that area? And how will that affect the aquifer if they are drilling or if they are using wells on that facility?
I don't know if anybody knows different. I mean, from the materials I've reviewed, I think all of the water is coming from the city, from the water treatment facility, so it should be lake water. I am not aware of them having like any kind of backup groundwater systems or wells. I know they will have backup, they have 51 backup generators or something they're planning for, but I haven't seen anything about any wells. Anybody else?
Okay, we do know that these are plots of lands that have wells that the farmers were using and everything like that. So my concern is, are they going to get into our aquifer? And the other side of that is, what about watering to keep the plants and things like that that they're going to supposedly put around the facility? Where is that water coming from? Is that going to be port water or lake water, or are they going to maybe take well water to do those types of things?
I don't have specific data on how that thing is plumbed. It'll either be well water from the ground or it'll be connected to the utility. But ask, if you need 56 backup generators to run this thing, then what do we need this transmission line for? That brings in megawatts of power. There's something out of balance with that formula. If you can run it on 50 generators, you don't need transmission.
Yeah, I mean, just from going to way more common council meetings than I ever intended or wanted to, I believe the answer is they are going to be using city water for all of that.
Okay, so it'll all be city water, and those of us that have wells really don't have anything to worry about.
I don't think you do. I think but as for some of the other, impacts, such as all of the water they're using and trying to, needing to upgrade the sewage, wastewater plants, et cetera, all of those costs, yes. But I don't think your wells are going to run dry.
So it may not affect the volume in your well, but with all of the construction and the pile driving, that's going to affect your private wells. So it's going to dislodge biofilm and it's going to dislodge a lot of contaminants. So again, you're probably going to be on the hook for testing that well water and make sure that that remains safe.
Yeah, and I think, stormwater too, we're gonna have to really pay attention to. So, I mean, you're basically converting, hundreds of acres, maybe more, from what was, probably some of the best farmland in the country into pavement and rooftops. And so that, that will have polluted runoff it's gonna find its way to the waterways eventually. And I mean, it could potentially impact groundwater resources, I would say. But, I think all of the water that they've stated that they're going to use is coming from the lake. But, I think it would be good for folks to it's always good to test your wells. And I test them early and then make sure that you have like some baseline information in case there are any changes in the future. And the State Lab of Hygiene makes it really easy for you. Definitely check out their website. They send you a cooler and a sample bottle. You can take a sample, send it in. They'll email you the results, super easy.
I just want to say in support, so I hate to break it to you, but I've been helping the city of Beaver Dam against their project, and construction's been underway for months. And the people who live nearest the construction, there are people who are reporting issues with their well, and there's issues with well testing. So that's definitely, absolutely, 100% something you want to keep an eye on and be vigilant about.
I would also have to say that they have many existing wells on the property already when they bought it because of all the homes that were leveled. So they do have existing wells, and who's to say that they're not using those existing wells for whatever they need to do? So are they capped? I don't know. So some, but they're always, if they're open for contamination. Oh, there you go. That's a good plan. Yeah, concrete it. No problem. Okay, just wanted to mention that they do have water, I am sure. So, okay.
Awesome, great. And we do have announcements, someone here about submitting comments to the PSC.
Right, so the big case right now involving We Energies is that before the HEC project gets going is the price to set the power rates for the data centers. I'm here with the Citizens Utility Board, and we and a bunch of groups have gotten involved in that case. We Energies has called what it's proposing a ratepayer protection plan, and they call it a gold standard for data center tariffs around the country. Our team has looked into this, and we don't think it's worth the bronze or the silver or the gold. We think that there's a lot of risk with the stranded costs that Danny's been mentioned. With the stranded cost risk, customers in Wisconsin are already paying $1 billion for dead power plants. And if the AI bubble bursts, We Energies now has $6 billion of new infrastructure that it's applied for, including upgrades to the Port Washington natural gas plant right here. So there's a case right now. There was a public hearing yesterday on it. I just checked while I was in the room here. Over 600 people have actually already submitted comments in that case. But the deadline is Tuesday, and so if you want to submit comments in that case, we have links and details on our website, cubwi.org, and then there are flyers from another group that talking about that as well. Just looking for our data centers link. And the last thing I just want to mention related to next week is Cheryl and Nenn mentioned call your legislators, and there are 2 bills going through the legislature right now. A Senate committee just announced a hearing for Tuesday on the data center bills, and we're going to be testifying in support of the Jody Havish-Sinekin bill that would actually create a fair statewide framework from utility to utility for these projects. So thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for the Q&A section. So we've just got a last couple of slides to kind of wrap things up. Christine's going to walk through this for us, and then we'll get you out of here. But thank you for coming tonight, and please do pay attention to these last couple of slides because this is kind of where it becomes actionable, right? We've talked a lot about it. Everybody seems to generally be on the same page, but what are we going to do about it, right? So that's what we're going to cover now.
Yeah, exactly. So this is just our closing for all of you. Thank you so much for coming tonight and for staying. So now, of course, what we do now decides our future. We need to actually take action and continue to take action. It's going to be more of a marathon than just, a sprint, obviously. And so these are a couple of action items that we have.